Happy New Year to all of you, if that applies still. We hope you have started well the year and in good health, and good to see you online on this first session of 2025. As always, the ones who have joined these sessions, remember that we have simultaneous interpretation available from English to French and Spanish. So make sure you're on the right channel. Today, we will be hearing the experience from our colleagues from the Red Cross Treatment Center for Persons Affected by War and Torture. And they will be sharing their experience with the project My Heart Sister, based on a Taylor Group intervention for women with experiences of war, torture, and forced migration. So there will be also some space at the end for Q&A. So make sure you do keep your questions for those Q&A spaces, or you can also write them in the chat, so we can hopefully bring them into the discussion. Yes. And well, before we start, I will hand it out to Lisa Henry, IRCT's Secretary General, for some opening remarks.
All right. Thank you very much, Berta. And Happy New Year to all. As always, this is the space, and we're really happy to see you from all around the globe. Friendly faces and good colleagues from around the world who are all working in the area of rehabilitation of torture survivors, helping them to heal and move on their pathway to justice. There is so much need for this, especially these exact days. So I can't imagine a better space than this space of solidarity and professional expertise and exchange. You know the drill. This is, in that way, it's a formal setting, yet informal. So we really encourage, asking questions, put your hand up. As Berta so kindly said, put a question in the chat. We get asked, and most recently okay, so you have these great webinars. We see a lot of people attending. There's lots of questions. Are they really working? And my response is, well, if people keep showing up, we must be doing something right. And creating a space of solidarity in and of itself is super important. But, taking the learning and really challenging ourselves to say, okay, what can I do with what I've heard today? Can I challenge myself? Can I bring this back to my team? These are some of the things that we're working with in IRCT and the whole global movement. But I think in and of itself that you're here from all around the globe to listen to your good colleagues. And in this instance, you're going to be listening to good colleagues from the Swedish Red Cross. I hope to also inspire you to say, if you yourself in your center with some of your colleagues have experienced, you think, this also should be shared globally. This is a space for you. So you can step up and you can write to Berta at IRCT, bso@irct.org, and that is where you would get some acceptance of new ideas for future webinars. But as said, today we have a really interesting presentation from the Swedish Red Cross, and this is coming, and it's been, now I understand, co-created by a survivor. My Heart Sister, the actual name and the title, comes from a woman who is in and receiving support from the Red Cross. We know group intervention methodology can be really important, and providing a supportive community is incredibly important, and maybe one of the best tools in our toolbox for treating survivors of torture, those who've experienced war, those who've experienced forced migration, and the atrocities that can happen along the way, the human rights violations. So super interesting methodology, great experience from the Swedish Red Cross, and thank you very much for bringing this, to the stage, to this webinar. And we look forward to hearing, sharp questions from your colleagues so that we can increase the knowledge around this theme, but also so that we can make sure that we're going to be able to take this back to our individual organizations, to the leadership in our organizations, or to our colleagues in the mental health professional field. So thank you very much, and over to you, Berta.
Perfect. Thank you, Lisa. And as Lisa said, I will also put my email in the chat so you can bring in new topics that you would be interested to hear about in these spaces. But yeah, without further ado, well, I'll introduce our two speakers today. We have Linda Jolof, She's a psychologist, and Patricia Rocca, physiotherapist, and they both work at the Red Cross Treatment Center for persons affected by war and torture in Malmö, Sweden. So if Linda and Patricia, you want to go ahead, the floor is yours.
Perfect.
Let me know if you need support.
Thank you so very much, Berta, and thank you, Lisa, for that introduction. So we are really, really happy to be here. We're just going to set up our presentation and then we'll start. So just give me 1 second to share this with you and give me a thumbs up, please, when you can see the presentation. Yes, perfect. Thank you very much. It's very good to see you as well, Frida. Okay, so hello everyone, and thank you so much for having us here today. We're so glad to be here to discuss our work with you. In today's presentation, we will introduce you to the project My Heart Sister, a project that focuses on women with experiences of war, torture, and forced migration. The ones who will be presenting here today is me, Linda Jolof. I'm a licensed clinical psychologist at the Red Cross Treatment Center for persons affected by war and torture in Malmö. With me, I have my colleague. Patricia, would you like to say?
Yeah, hi everyone. My name is Patricia Rocca. I'm a physiotherapist at the Red Cross Center, and I have been working here for 10 years this autumn. So very happy to be here with you today.
Yes, I'm glad that you're here with me, Patricia. Thank you so much. Our supervisor in this project is Marie Carlson. She's an assistant professor at Malmö University. Unfortunately, she couldn't join us today for the presentation. So thank you all for being here, and I would like to say a special thanks to our interpreters. Your work here is invaluable. So let's begin. Today we are presenting the project My Heart Sister and the 3 phases that we worked through so far in the project. We will be going through the following bullet points today. So we're going to give you a brief introduction to the project My Heart Sister. Then we will discuss the background, which is phase 1 and 2 of the project. Then we will focus a bit on phase number 3, which is the phase that we are in, and which is the phase that we developed and tested a group intervention for women with experiences of war, torture, and flight. We will talk a bit about what happens next in the future. We will share some reflections so far, and then we'll save some time for questions and discussion at the end. Please write questions in the chat, and I think Berta is going to monitor the chat, and we will follow up on the questions at the end. Okay. So to give you a brief description and introduction to the project. The project primarily involves Patricia, our supervisor Marie, and myself. This team has been in place since phase 3 began in 2023. In phases 1 and 2, we collaborated with the Red Cross University College in Sweden, and the project was a part of the Swedish Red Cross Center for Rehabilitation of Torture and War Trauma. This project started in response to an observation that we made at our center. We saw that significantly fewer women than men were seeking treatment at our center, despite evidence showing similar trauma and PTSD rates among both genders. This led us to ask questions like, are women less likely to seek trauma treatment? If so, why is that? Are current treatments unsuitable for their needs, or are women's trauma experiences being overlooked by the primary health care, who are usually the ones that refer patients to us? Although we still don't have all the answers, our work so far has provided valuable insights, and we will share these in the presentation. So for an overview of the project, please have a look at the vertical timeline to your right. In phases 1 and 2, we conducted literature reviews and interviews with former patients and healthcare staff at the Swedish Red Cross centers. And the work that we did in phase number 1 and 2 laid the foundation for the work that we have done in phase number 3. So in the following presentation, we will walk you through each of these phases. So we're just going to show you these. So far in the project, we've published 4 scientific articles and 2 Swedish reports. And at the end of this presentation, we will give you the links to the articles so you can access them. They are all free access. So to give you a bit of context, maybe some of you are not super acquainted with Sweden, so we included a map. Malmö is located down south to the west, very close to Denmark. And both our treatment center and Malmö University are located here. So the RKC Malmö, which is our center, is one of 5 treatment centers or Red Cross treatment centers in Sweden. We treat approximately 400 patients per year, of which 60% are men and 40% are women. We treat PTSD from war, torture, and forced migration. And at our center, we have psychologists working, but also physiotherapists, social workers, a medical doctor, interpreters, and administrative personnel. So Malmö University was founded in 1998 and has approximately 24,000 students. Malmö University is especially known for its focus on interdisciplinary research, and the university offers a wide range of programs across different fields. So we're going to continue to a bit of background. Before we go into presenting the different phases of the project, we would like to highlight some of the research that has formed the foundation of our work in the project. For this presentation, we will be focusing on earlier studies concerning the health of the target group, the availability of relevant treatment within the Swedish context, and some international guidelines for trauma treatment. We all know that conflict, torture, and forced migration affect the health and well-being of millions of women every year. Research shows that women and men experience trauma differently. Women, in general, report fewer traumatic events, but are more often exposed to family-related and sexualized violence. Refugee women face worse health outcomes than do refugee men, including higher rates of pain, poor mobility, lower quality of life, and mental health issues such as anxiety, depression, and PTSD. Despite severe health issues, women often face barriers to accessing healthcare, such as family responsibilities and societal constraints. In Sweden, trauma-focused care is unevenly distributed, with specialized treatment available in only half the regions. Primary care often handles PTSD treatment, though knowledge levels vary. The evidence base for PTSD treatment is on an international level low, but recommendations for treatment include EMDR, various CBT treatments, and body awareness training. There is a huge need for further research regarding PTSD for specifically vulnerable groups such as women, children, or people with complex PTSD. So with that, I'd like to hand over the word to Patricia, and she will talk you through phase number 1 of the project.
Yeah, thank you, Linda, for that introduction. So now we will go on with the phase 1 of the project, which was when we did the 2 literature overviews. Next slide, please. So in the first phase, we conducted 2 sub-studies. In the first sub-study, we wanted to summarize and analyze previous research on women's experiences of war, torture, and migration. So we carried out a systematic review of qualitative studies in 3 databases, and we complemented this with manual searches. We screened around 3,800 articles, and of these, we included 26 articles. And these 26 articles were then processed using a method called thematic analysis. For sub-study 2, we conducted a scoping review of studies testing and evaluating interventions to promote health for women with experiences of war, torture, and migration. The searches were carried out in 5 databases, and we also complemented this with manual searches. We included almost We screened almost 17,000 articles, but only 13 of these were included. And these were analyzed using the method narrative analysis, and we also did systematic summaries of the content. So here we have the results for the first study, the theme and the sub-themes. We found 3 themes, and within each theme, we identified several sub-themes. Some of these themes and sub-themes can be seen as more general experiences that apply for both women and men, but we also identified some sub-themes that we thought were more gender-specific for women. In the first theme, women described war and conflict as events that turned their entire existence upside down. The sub-themes we found revolved around a reduced sense of safety, difficulties in meeting basic needs, the process and decisions leading to migration, as well as the aspects of traumatic experiences that could lead to positive consequences, such as growing closer to family members as a result of what they had endured together. The second theme concerned the health-related consequences of war and migration. These included stress and mental health issues resulting from the challenges the women faced, as well as difficulties in accessing healthcare and support during war and displacement. We also identified recurring sub-themes that were more specific to women, namely the particular vulnerabilities associated with being pregnant or giving birth in a war and migration context. This included not having access to proper care when complications arose during pregnancy or delivery, or being displaced while pregnant or newly postpartum. And another prominent and recurring theme was women's multiple exposure to violence. This violence was both in the context of war and conflicts, violence that could be both general but also specifically targeted at women, such as systematic sexualized violence. We also found accounts of intimate partner violence, which often increased during times of war and conflict. And the third theme we identified concerns women's resources and strategies to cope with the difficulties they faced. Because despite the numerous challenges that women encounter during war and displacement, they managed to mobilize and utilize resources to care for themselves and their families. And these resources and strategies can be divided into 2 sub-themes. Firstly, how they draw strength from social support, friends, other women, their families. A recurring description here that was highlighted was motherhood, and how motherhood served as a source of strength and resilience. And the resources could also be internal. Women sought to maintain daily routines as much as possible. They used humor to remain hopeful and engaged politically. Next one. So here we have some quotes that we have selected to bring our findings to life. So the first quote, it describes how a woman is separated from her family when her village is attacked, how she witnesses death, and how she herself is taken away and held captive. The second quote, it portrays women's vulnerability during pregnancy and the violence they could be subjected to in connection with it. And the final quote highlights the importance of social supports from friends and family in enduring the hardships they experienced. So we just give you, okay.
Oh, sorry.
I thought I would have a second to read them. I don't know if everyone can read in English, but those who can. Okay, Linda. So now we will go on to the results for study 2. And in study 2, as I said before, we wanted to examine the interventions that women were offered. So in the 13 articles that we included, we identified 10 different interventions. None of the interventions offered traditional trauma therapy. Instead, they showed a variety of approaches in terms of content. These included creative measures, such as using puppet theater to discuss how displacement had affected women's roles in the family and society, interventions where women learned entrepreneurship, interventions for processing grief over lost spouses, and interventions for coping with life as it was at the time. And all interventions, except for one, were group-based, and the interventions were primarily delivered by facilitators or peer supporters, most of whom were women. The number of sessions ranged from 5 to 24 sessions, and each session was between 1 to 3 hours. And our summary and analysis of the content of the interventions showed that the most common components were skill building, for example, emotional regulation. It was psychoeducation about mental health, social support by sharing stories, and different body and mind techniques, such as grounding and breathing. The interventions were acceptable and relevant for the participants. There were no negative consequences or side effects reported in the articles. But they reported a few challenges, and the challenges identified included cultural aspects, language barriers, difficulties for participants to complete assessment forms, and the length of the sessions. And additional challenges included a desire for more support than what was offered, a lack of financial compensation, but also challenges related to confidentiality. And most of the studies showed that the interventions had a positive effect on PTSD, on depression, and on anxiety. And in these studies where we could see an improvement of these diagnoses, the most common components of the interventions were skill building, psychoeducation, and social support. The next slide. So to summarize our most important findings of these two studies in phase 1 is that women face specific stresses primarily related to their extensive vulnerability to gender-based violence. This violence is influenced by structural norms and perceptions of gender roles and power structures. And it results in serious consequences for these women. And the structural violence occurs in the context of war and displacement, but women also face violence experience from family members. So consequently, you could say that the violence follows women from the public sphere to the private sphere, and it's many times also continues in their post-migratory setting. We were very surprised to see that none of the articles included in study 1 spoke about women's experiences of torture. We know that women, just as like men, are exposed to torture as defined by the UN. So why was this experience lacking in our results? We could see that there is a lot of resistance and coping in these women. They demonstrate a significant resilience, and they use various resources to find strength. And previous research has highlighted the importance of access to social support in promoting resilience to women. And in our results, we observed how many women described access to social support as crucial for them. We were also surprised to see that none of the identified interventions focused on trauma processing. Instead, they centered around skill training for present well-being. The studies also had a narrow focus on health consequences, so they were primarily focusing on three mental health aspects, that is PTSD, depression, and anxiety. And we know from other research that there is a need to explore how different dimensions interact to influence women's overall health. And there is also, we also had some difficulties about the transferability to the clinical context, because the interventions that we identified, they were very diverse in their content and focus. So thank you, Linda. That was phase 1.
Thank you so much, Patricia. So with that, we're going to move on to phase number 2 of the project. So after completing phase 1, we transitioned into phase 2. One can say that we moved from the more theoretical phase into the more empirical phase. So during phase 2, we conducted individual interviews and facilitated focus group discussions with female former patient and healthcare staff at the Red Cross treatment centers in Sweden. So on the following slides, we will provide a more detailed description of this phase. So in phase number 2, we conducted 2 interview studies. First, we interviewed women who had taken part of treatment at any of the Swedish Red Cross treatment centers. We did this to gather their perspectives on the treatment that they had taken part of and to identify areas for improvement. Additionally, we interviewed healthcare staff at the Red Cross treatment centers to understand their experiences of providing trauma-focused treatment to women and to explore ways to improve healthcare for them. This work was guided by the research questions that you can see on the slide. And the focus group and individual interviews were carried out digitally or on site, and interpreters were used when needed. So we conducted interviews with 11 women and held 7 focus groups involving a total of 33 healthcare staff at the Red Cross treatment centers. The age of the women that were interviewed ranged from 21 to 70 years, and they came from 9 different countries in Europe, South America, Middle East, and Africa. The healthcare personnel consisted mainly of clinical psychologists, but also physiotherapists, social workers, and administrative personnel. The material that we gathered was systematically analyzed with a method for text condensation. When having analyzed the research data, the results showed that the women showed both poor physical and mental health, and they lived in challenging psychosocial circumstances. They were also carrying high levels of responsibility for their families and home, and at the same time they were struggling to establish themselves in Sweden. However, they also showed a lot of strength and resilience in trying to cope with the challenges that they met. They were also survivors of gender-based violence, something that was described to occur on both individual and structural levels, persisting from their home countries into their new environments in Sweden. According to feedback from the focus groups and the women, the reception at the Red Cross treatment center was positive. While the women reported experiencing positive health effects of the treatment, both healthcare staff and women also said that it was challenging. The focus groups expressed that they had the necessary methods and knowledge to address trauma and PTSD, and they emphasized the significance of interdisciplinary teamwork to meet the diverse needs of women. We also asked them about barriers for treatment, and several barriers were identified on different levels. Individual barriers to treatment for the women included issues of trust and fear of male healthcare personnel. They also saw and identified psychosocial barriers included women responsibilities for family and children and their home, concerns about finances, and uncertainty surrounding asylum processes, for example. On a structural level, the need for increased knowledge about refugee women was highlighted. Improvement suggestions were provided by both the women and the healthcare staff and included, for example, improving collaboration with other healthcare services and authorities, and enhancing the knowledge on how to address ongoing violence during trauma treatment. The women also expressed a desire for support groups to share experiences, and they sought more information about their human rights. So to give you a sense of what the participants in the interviews and focus group discussions said, we've chosen 2 quotes. In the quote to your left, participant number 9 expresses what she learned from her trauma treatment. And in the quote to your right, a physiotherapist reflects on the possibility that in our effort to avoid making generalizations, we may overlook important patterns within a group. For example, what a subgroup have in terms of experiences. So we're going to give you a second to read these before moving on. Okay, changing slides. So the main conclusions from phase number 2 that we would like to highlight are the following. Women show a wide range of physical and mental health issues, and they live in challenging psychosocial conditions. However, they also show a lot of resilience and strength. According to the focus groups and the women, the care that they received and gave at the Red Cross Treatment Center was highly appreciated. The women experienced positive health effects from the treatment, although it was also described as challenging by both the healthcare staff and the women. Several barriers to care were identified, along with numerous suggestions for how the care could be adapted to better meet the needs of women. Based on the results from phase number 1 and 2, we formulated some recommendations for the future. These apply to both clinical practice and further research. Clinically, there's a need to increase access to interdisciplinary treatment. We need to raise awareness of what available support there is and promote collaboration between healthcare institutions and authorities. Efforts should focus on overcoming gender-specific barriers to care, for example, by offering digital treatment options and also providing support groups for women on rights, parenting, and peer support. Also, care planning should emphasize women's strengths. Future research should continue to explore gender-specific and culturally sensitive aspects of healthcare for refugee women, focusing on effective components in trauma treatment, long-term outcomes, and the role of peer support. Women should also be actively involved in research regarding them and development efforts. So with that, we are moving on to phase number 3, and I'm handing the word over to Patricia.
So now
Yes.
now we reach the most exciting part, I think, which is how did we translate the knowledge gained from the first 2 parts of the project into an intervention? So next slide, please, Linda. So to develop the intervention, we first needed to determine its purpose. What did we want to achieve with the intervention, and how could we adapt it to our clinical reality? So since the women at the Red Cross Treatment Center in Malmö already are offered individual trauma treatment, we decided that the intervention would not focus on treating PTSD. Instead, we wanted to develop a complementary intervention that could be offered alongside the trauma treatment or as a standalone option. And we wanted to focus on three things. We wanted to take like an overall aspect on the women's health. So we wanted it to consist of psychological treatment components, physiotherapeutic treatment components, and psychosocial treatment components. And we also wanted to offer the women the possibility to be in a group according to our findings on the importance of social support. So we hoped that the group format would provide the women an opportunity to offer each other social and emotional support and to establish new contacts, which could reduce the feelings of loneliness and social isolation. So after much discussion and with support from our supervisor, and also based on the conclusions from phase 1 and 2, as well as the existing services available to the women on the treatment center, we define the intervention's purpose as follows: to create conditions for post-traumatic growth and the exchange of social support by sharing experiences in a group setting of being a woman during war and displacement and how these experiences impact life today. So we hope for the intervention to help the women break the culture of silence and reduce feelings of shame and enhance their feeling of empowerment. So as I said, a recurring finding in the first 2 phases is the importance of adopting a holistic perspective on health. And here on this slide, you can see the components that we included in the intervention. So we used a text, a short text describing the UN Convention on Women's Rights, because we want to elevate personal experiences to a broader structural level. We also decided that we wanted to use case studies to get the group discussion started. And I will present these case studies in a moment. But with the use of these case studies, we offer the participants an opportunity to discuss different aspects of being a woman in war and displacement without them feeling that they need to share their own personal experiences, even if we, of course, welcome them to do so if they want to. And the case studies also gives us a chance to present that women's experiences of war and displacement are very alike, despite where in the world they come from. And through practicing body awareness, the women are given the opportunity to increase their self-awareness and hopefully feel more competent in making independent decisions regarding their health. And this is achieved by having the women practice listening to their own needs, communicating their needs, and making active choices in the training session. And then we wanted the participants to have tailored psychosocial information relevant to them according to questions that may arise during the group discussions. Because we believe, and we know from our clinical experience, that access to information can enable the women to make well-informed decisions regarding their own life situation and future. And finally, we want to round up the group with a closing ceremony, where the women have a chance to reflect on how it's been to participate in the group, and we also encourage the women to give us feedback on how to improve this intervention. And here on this slide, you can see the structure for the intervention. Because we meet during 9 sessions, each session being 2 hours long. The first hour is for the group discussions. Then we have a 10 to 15 minutes so-called fikapaus in Swedish, and that is when you eat something and drink something and just move around a bit. And then we end with some body awareness training for around 40 to 45 minutes. And the first session is an introductory session. That is where we present ourselves. We give a short background on the project My Half Sister. We set up group rules. And we read this short text on the UN Conventions on Women's and Girls' Rights. And then we have a discussion around that text. And then to end this day, this session, we do some playful activities just to get to know each other a bit better. Session 2 to 7 is when we start the group discussions around the case studies. So we do that for 1 hour, and then we have this fika pause, and then we do train body awareness for the rest of the time. And session 8 is dedicated to the psychosocial support. And that session is held by 2 social counselors working here at the Red Cross Treatment Center in Malmö. And session 9 is the last session where we have a closing ceremony and we have the evaluation of the group. Next. Next slide, Linda. Yeah. So we wrote these case studies, and what we wanted to was to promote, or what was important for me and Linda was to promote authenticity, avoid biases and stereotypes, and strengthen the international perspective in these case studies. And we have written these case studies according to our clinical experience, but just to get this authenticity and avoid biases, we developed this further with our colleagues and women with own lived experience. So first we had a very experienced colleague to read and comment on our first draft. And then we had a workshop with a group of colleagues, a physiotherapist, a social counselor, and 2 psychologists to read and comment on our second draft. And finally, we had 2 patients, one from Afghanistan and one from Syria, to read and comment on 1 patient case each. So the woman from Afghanistan read the patient case that is from on a woman from Afghanistan, and the one from Syria got to read another one. And of course, we also had our supervisor to give us feedback before we had a final product. Next slide. And here is our final product. So we wrote 6 case studies. And we wanted the case studies to represent women from different conflict zones. And these conflict zones represented here are those conflict zones where we have our patients from. And we also wanted the case studies to represent the different challenges that women might experience throughout war, migration, and in the post-migratory setting. So in each case study, there is a description of the women's experiences during the war, a description of her trauma, a description of her psychosocial challenges in the new country, of her physical health, and of course, a description of her resources. So we have Amal from Syria. That case study is about gender roles in the family and about this, because Amal is a young woman taking a lot of responsibility since her parents are not feeling well. Erna from Bosnia is a middle-aged woman that has been submitted to sexualized violence by military. Faduma from Somalia has also been submitted to sexual violence because of mutilation. She had not had the chance to go to school, and her patient case is a lot of that case study is a lot about motherhood, because in Sweden, one of her children are not doing well in life. Halima from Kurdistan has been in war and submitted to torture and sexualized violence. Rania from Iraq is about restriction of personal agency and about motherhood, about having lost children during war. And Masuma from Afghanistan has been submitted to gender-based violence, sexualized violence within the marriage, and restriction of her personal agency. So thank you, Linda.
Thank you so much, Patricia. I just had a severe case of cough, so I hope that I can continue. I think we're going to present a few more slides before taking a short break. My voice isn't usually this deep, but I'm struggling with a cold that I have been struggling with for 2 weeks. Okay, so we are continuing. Thank you so much. So the group discussions are central to this intervention. And we wanted to provide participants with a safe space to share experiences, exchange thoughts, and offer and receive social support. So the fictional cases that Patricia just described were created to guide the discussions on both individual and structural levels, supported by a set of predetermined questions on the themes social support, empowerment, and women's living situation around the world. And you can see the questions on the slide, and the questions are meant to be seen as a starting point, something that limits the discussion. So each session follows a structured agenda. The case is read out loud, followed by an open reflection on participants' personal experiences. To align the discussions with the intervention's goals, focusing on social support, empowerment, and women's living conditions, the questions that you can see are introduced. They can, however, be adapted as needed, and usually we also add questions in the discussion. So cases are discussed over 2 sessions. The first session allows for an open dialogue that runs more freely, and the second session focuses on key themes or questions that we haven't discussed yet. As facilitators, our role is to encourage participation and encourage the women to be active in the discussion. Our role is also to ensure relevance, that the discussions stay relevant to the purpose of the intervention, and at the same time that they provide a space for an open expression. So usually we present questions to get started, like, what are your spontaneous thoughts when you hear her story, and what can you relate to? In the questions on theme social support, we raise questions like, how do you think that the people around her should act to support her? What would you like to say or do to support her? And what are your thoughts on her not telling anyone how she's feeling? Questions on theme empowerment include, what do you think she can do to help herself to feel better? Do you think that she can use her experience to grow and become stronger? And if yes, how? What can we learn from what we have discussed today? And then we have case-specific questions regarding gender-based issues, and we adjusted these according to the case that we just presented. So these questions evolve around sexualized violence, female genital mutilation, forced marriage, gender roles, just to mention a few examples. So we spend an hour discussing, then we have the fika break that Patricia mentioned, and then we move on to our physiotherapist part.
Exactly, where we do some body awareness training. And the body awareness training is supposed to follow the themes that have arisen, so that we discussed during the group discussions. So there are themes about social support, about empowerment, but also about sexual health, and since that is affected in many of these women. So as I said before, the aim of the practicing of body awareness is to give the women the opportunity to increase their self-awareness and hopefully feel more competent in making independent decisions about their health, but also to prompt self-care. And this is achieved by the women practice listening to their own needs expressing those needs, and making active choices during the training according to their needs, their resources, or their limitations. So each training session begins with the women sharing how they currently feel in their bodies and what they need. It could be a feeling they want to achieve, it can be an exercise they want to do. And the women are then guided verbally and manually in body awareness exercises. And during the last 5 minutes of the training, I encourage the women to choose an exercise in any starting position that they wish to explore independently, or if they have other movements that they enjoy in their bodies, to do those movements for 5 minutes. We also practice setting boundaries and giving and receiving care and social support through partner exercises. And each training session concludes with the women verbalizing what they're taking away from the practice. Okay, Linda, that was it.
Yes. So before moving on to talk about how the first 2 rounds of the intervention have gone, we thought it might be interesting for you to provide some more detail about the research aspect of the project. So, as we mentioned in the start of the presentation, our supervisor is Marie Carlson. She is an assistant professor at Malmö University, and she has an extensive experience of conducting research on group trauma treatment for women that have been subjected to violence, including sexualized violence. Her role in this project has been to collaborate with us in developing the intervention and also monitor the implementation process. She's also responsible for the scientific evaluation, and she's our continuous sounding board for discussing ideas and possible ways forward. The intervention will be evaluated both quantitatively and qualitatively. We will be using scales to measure subjective experience of social support, post-traumatic growth, body awareness, PTSD, and depression and anxiety. The intervention will also be, excuse me, evaluated in a qualitative manner. Marie Carlson is planning to do follow-up interviews with the participants and also with staff from our treatment center. Since this is scientific research, we spend 1 session before the intervention starts to provide the women with information about participating in the research study. They can, of course, choose not to participate, but if they do want to participate, they get the opportunity to sign the informed consent before starting. So, after all this work, with the intervention developing, we started testing the intervention in the spring of 2024. So, in the first group of the group intervention, women from Afghanistan, Bosnia, and Lebanon participated. However, in the end of the intervention, only women from Afghanistan and Bosnia remained. The women contributed to the discussions by sharing their experiences of war and forced migration, and also about being a woman in a new country, trying to make sense of the new living conditions, raising a family, going to school, and also trying to navigate between new and traditional social norms, for example, regarding wearing a hijab or not.
And we also had the individual body awareness training. And all of these women had been in treatment for quite long, right? Yeah, quite long. So they had all had individual body awareness training with a physiotherapist at the center. So they were familiar with the concept of putting words on their bodily experiences and quite independent in their training. They were also used to adapt the exercises to their physical limitations. For example, if they had trouble coming down to the floor, they would do the same exercises in another starting position, sitting or standing. And that made it quite easy for me to lead this group. And recurring words that they used to describe how they felt after the training were safe, calm, and relaxed. And at the closing ceremony, when they evaluated the body awareness training, one woman had wished for more playful activities because she said she had never had the opportunity to play as a child. And in the introductory session, we had like more playful activities, and she would like to have more of that. But the training was described to give energy and joy, but that it was both challenging and soothing with the partner exercises.
So in round number 2, which was during the fall of 2024, the group consisted of women from the Middle East, more specifically from Syria and Lebanon, Palestine. Initially, the group consisted of 7 participants. In the end, 5 participants remained. The women were all affected by the ongoing situation in Palestine, Lebanon, and Syria, which initially made participating actively in the group challenging. However, they soon came to feel safe in the group, and they actively engaged in the group discussions. Recurring themes in the group discussions this round evolved around challenges in motherhood in the new country, but also around being a woman in the context of conflict and all the risks that imply. They specifically discussed how common it is with sexualized violence in conflict and the shame and stigma that follow on these experiences. The participants also repeatedly emphasized the importance of restoring hope to make it possible to continue life after traumatic experiences and losses. And this group was also offered a session with a social worker or with 2 social workers, and this session was very much appreciated. This session focused on how the Swedish social services work, with a specific focus on information about compulsory care of children. And I'm just also going to mention the picture before handing over to Patricia. The photo that you can see on the slide is from the closing ceremony where we had a potluck. So everyone that wanted to could bake or cook something to bring for the last discussion. And it was really, really yummy.
Yeah. In this group, leading the body awareness training was more of a challenge because some of the women were very new into treatment and they had not had a physiotherapeutic assessment yet, which is something we otherwise offer all patients at the center, but well, this had not had the chance to meet a physiotherapist yet. So I was not familiar with their physical limitations and resources, and they were not very familiar with the setting for body awareness training. 2 of the women had had individual physiotherapy treatment, and they were familiar with this kind of training, so they became quite important in the group. But there still was some insecurity in the group regarding sharing bodily sensations and needs and expressing needs for the practice, as well as being able to do the exercises independently. Even so, recurring words to describe the sensation after the training were relaxed, less pain, and more energy.
So at the end of both rounds of intervention, we asked the women what they thought about participating. And they said that they felt that it was a safe space to share thoughts and experiences. They felt seen and heard, and they appreciated getting the opportunity to meet with women who had similar life experiences and who were living in a similar living situation as themselves. One of the participants said, "It's important to talk to others who share the same experiences. I'm sorry, my voice is giving up. Patricia,
Mm.
would you like to read the quotes from the slide?
Yes, I will read them for you.
Thank
So
you.
this is, oh, this one, yeah. So this is some of the quotes from the participants. And the first quote is from the first group, where one Afghanistan woman said, "Girls and women's voices are not heard. No one listens to us." And another quote was, "One must try to be strong, otherwise you risk harming yourself and your family." The third quote, "My problems are significant, but I'm not alone in this. And we need to take care of ourselves, but we forget to do so. And now I understand that it doesn't only happen in our country, it affects women everywhere."
Thank
And
you
next
so
slide.
much.
And then the last group we had with the Arabic or the women from the Middle East, we asked them, "What would you like to say to your younger self?" And this is what they said: "Love yourself, get an education, and marry the right man. You are not crazy or weird, you are sick, and there is help to get." And one woman said, "Get an education, go to school." That is what she would have liked to say to her younger self.
Mm. So, after these 2 rounds of the intervention and all the work that we've done so far in the project, we wanted to share some of our reflections. And specifically regarding the group intervention, we could see that the intervention has very much been appreciated, but we have seen difficulties attaining continuity in attaining in the group intervention. And most commonly, canceling the intervention has been due to somatic health reasons. Like we've mentioned in this presentation, the women that we see carry a lot of bodily issues that make it hard for them to come. I'm sorry, Patricia, my voice.
Yeah, it's okay. I can take over.
Thank you.
Yeah. And we saw that physical limitations also sometimes is a hinder for the body awareness training, because the women are in so much pain, and I think they need to have I think it's good for the group if they had some kind of physiotherapeutic assessment and maybe some tools for working with their bodies already. The group format was very much appreciated. The women like to be in a group, they like to share experiences together, and they said that it felt that they had support and it broadened their perspective on their own traumas. So we could say that the purpose of the intervention is fulfilled according to social support. And the participants, they shared their own experiences, but also could raise the discussions to a structural level. And the traumas was multiple and many around gender-based violence. Yeah.
Great, thank you. I think we have one more slide before going into a 10-minute break. Does that sound okay? Yes. Perfect. So, what's next? What's in the future for the My Heart Sister project? We are now in the middle of the project's third phase. We recently started the first round of the MHS intervention for this semester, and our hope is to start another round in April. We continue to collect research data and will evaluate these and publish them when we have enough. In this coming semester, the plan is to start the work of formulating a treatment manual and also creating an implementation manual to facilitate spreading the intervention to other RKCs in Sweden. Our long-term aspiration is that the intervention will be available for women in the target group in other settings as well. We have also initiated a collaboration with the Center for Transcultural Psychiatry in Copenhagen, with the aim of deepening our knowledge and sharing the insights we have gained from the project with other relevant contexts. We are excited and we're looking forward to the future with the project. So I'm thinking our plan was to have a 10-minute break to get some coffee, maybe some tea. I'm going to take a coughing pill. And when we see each other back here in 10 minutes, we have prepared some questions for discussion, and we're also going to follow up on the questions in the chat. Okay? So have a nice 10-minute break. We will see you here maybe at 2:15.
Perfect.
That gives us 9 minutes, and we look forward to continue the discussion with you.
Perfect.
Yes, so see you in a bit.
See you back in from Lisa Henry. And she asked who were the facilitators for the first group work and whether they had any psychosocial or mental health skills or training.
We were the first facilitators for round number 1 as well.
So we've been the facilitators for all the groups we've had so far.
Yeah.
Good. Good. Thank you. Then Chiara Montaldo, she asks how the positive effects of the intervention were measured and evaluated. And she says that they often have challenges to find a good way to evaluate this type of interventions.
That is a challenge here as well. We have this, as you said now at the end, it's Marie Carlson from the university that does the evaluation, and it's some assessment forms regarding post-traumatic growth, social support, PTSD, depression, anxiety, body awareness, and well-being. And there is a challenge, of course, to fill in so many forms during 1 hour. It's challenges because the women have difficulty concentrating. It is challenging because as now in this group where we are now, and in the first group we have a lot of women that don't have any and that don't know how to write and read. So the questions have to be read out loud, and we have to help them a lot. So there are challenges doing the quantitative measures, but we are also evaluating, Marie is evaluating by doing individual interviews with those women that want to be interviewed. So we think that we will get some results from that further on.
Yeah. I'm not sure, actually, Chiara, do you want to go on mic and maybe share some of the specific challenges?
Yeah, no, well, thank you for the answer. Partially it was already replied also during the last part on the research. So I saw that you are using scales, and no, but I don't know if it's possible for you to then share these scales and these evaluation forms just to have support, because in our project we are also struggling a bit to find the proper scale and not too heavy, as you said, no, but in the same time helping us to evaluate the result of our intervention. So if it's possible, it will be nice to have this scale or evaluation form share. Thank you.
I think a challenge for us has also been to decide, of course, on which scales to settle, since it's not very clear what to measure. Like if we measure PTSD, is it from the group intervention? They are also participating individually in treatment. And we also noticed that some of the scales that we have chosen are quite complex to fill in. So up until now, everything has been, a bit of trial and error. We're testing what works. So I'm not sure that we're going to continue with these exact scales. Of course, we can share them, but they are still under, we're using them for trial and error.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, no, but it's just to have, how to say, something to compare and just to take ideas and to, because we are also like ongoing and in building up the best scale for us. Thank
Yes.
you.
Thank you so much. Yeah, we can have a discussion around that because it's important, right?
Yeah.
So I don't know how to reach you, if you want to leave your email, or do we send everything to Berta so she
Yeah.
can?
I
Exactly.
can send anyway my email in the chat, but then if you want to go to Berta, fine for me, as you prefer.
Yeah.
Actually, Linda and Patricia, if you wouldn't mind sharing the specific tools, then I can we can also make them available to everyone, all the attendees today,
Of course.
Yeah.
when we share
Yeah.
the recording and everything. Yeah.
Do you also want us to share the presentation with you?
Yeah, this presentation, you mean? I think I
Yeah.
do have it. So
Oh, right.
yeah.
Yeah.
True.
Yeah. And I think our emails are in the end of the presentation, right, Linda? So you can also.
Usually we include our emails. I'm not sure that we. Yeah, there you go.
Yeah. So you can always email us if you have further questions.
Yes, definitely.
Yeah. The endless M&E discussions.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. But then we have we can move on to another question, and this one comes from Caroline Schaffer-Geurin. I'm not sure, Caroline, if you prefer to go on mic. Otherwise, I can read your question. She's asking, do the women in these groups all share the same language? And if not, how do you manage language justice in this setting?
To make it easy. Sorry, you go
yeah.
ahead.
We have decided that the group has we have one interpreter in the group. So there can be, like, we had the women from Afghanistan and we had a women from Bosnia, but then the women from Bosnia had to be able to speak and understand Swedish good enough to be in the group. So we only use one interpreter. So we have like another language / Swedish.
Exactly. And
Yeah.
so far
Perfect.
we tried Dari
Yeah.
in Swedish, Arabic and Swedish, and in this round that we are in, that's also a Dari Swedish group.
Yeah. So the Swedish speaking person can be from anywhere in the world, from any country.
Good. Thank you. Thanks for that. Actually, related, I'm going to go now to another question, maybe also related to this. So Ekaterine, she's asking whether all these women are in Sweden. I understand that the answer is yes. And she's asking, how about all the women who have no chance of living in Sweden?
Yeah. This group is within our treatment center. The treatment center is in Sweden, and we accept any adult or any person over 18 that has an experience of war, migration, and torture. So it's in a Swedish context, and the intervention is also evaluated in this context. That these women already have some individual treatment offered in our center, and then they have this group as an add-on to their individual treatments.
Okay. Actually, Caroline, she's also asking whether these families. Hi, go ahead, Caroline. That's good.
Good morning. Thank you so much for this
Good
presentation.
morning.
It has been incredible.
Thank you.
My other question was, for the women served, are they in Sweden by themselves or are there families with them? And for those with families, do you incorporate them into this healing process?
Very good question. Do you mean women at the center in general, or the women that we have worked with in this intervention specifically?
Specifically in this intervention.
From what I can remember, Patricia, correct me if I'm wrong, I think all the women have been quite settled in Sweden, and they all have families, maybe not.
All have families in Sweden, or at least their children in Sweden.
Exactly. In general, at our center, we see women, who are here by themselves and who are like newly arrived to Sweden. But I would say for this intervention, since they're already taking part of individual treatment, we've only seen women who are quite settled and established in Sweden with their families.
And in this intervention, we don't include their family members, but at center, we have support for family members, and we offer family members to have a better understanding of what PTSD is by inviting them to a session to speak about how PTSD can affect a person. We never speak about the patient's individual experiences, but just in general how PTSD works. And then we have also some child support, that if you have a child, the child can be included in a project called Flight Birds.
Oh,
Yeah. So we don't offer children treatment like trauma treatment, but we do have a worked out program to involve children who are children to our patients, kind of.
Exactly.
In a group activity.
Yeah, and in this group they go through the past and the now and the future, but in a more playful way.
Right.
Yeah. And that's up to 12 years, I think.
I think it's for children between 6 and 12, something like that, 7 and 12.
And then we tried to have groups for adolescents who are next of kin to our patients, but it was kind of hard to recruit teenagers to come here to talk about their life. But at least we tried to, you know. So thank you for your question.
Yeah. Said Caroline. I'm actually gonna encourage the ones who have been writing the question. So Carmen Alonso, I'm gonna go to you in case you want to mute yourself and pose the question yourself. Otherwise, I'm happy to read it.
Oh,
If you're still
sure.
here.
Yes, thank you, Berta. Yes, thank you for the lovely presentation and the important work that you do. I'm originally from Spain, but I live in Madison, Wisconsin, and I run some groups for women with history of abuse with 3 components: mindfulness, healing from trauma, and empowerment self-defense. And I've learned that inviting women with a history of trauma to come to their bodies can be quite a delicate process in a way, as you probably have experienced too. And I remember one person who was tortured severely as a little kid, and the whole invitation of coming back to the breath was so triggering for her, understandably so. So that's why I asked the question, how did you invite people to come to their bodies, even to move their bodies, when their bodies have such a history of profound trauma?
Exactly, and that's why we invite people to come to their bodies, because the body holds so much trauma. It needs to be processed through the body as well as through the thoughts and emotions. The physiotherapy and body awareness training is a part of what we offer all patients at the Red Cross treatment centers in Sweden. And the physiotherapists working with this have a long education in working with body awareness. So, of course, when you do it individually, it's easier to address that specific person and to work with the traumas and how they are stored in their bodies. If you do it in a group setting, you have to have another approach and maybe be even more inviting and giving alternatives. So maybe not, sometimes they feel good about feeling their breath in their body, and sometimes it can be very, as you said, very triggering. Being in contact with their bodies. The patients or the women we offer this group to, this intervention, they need to be quite stable. So those women that maybe are very easily triggered or dissociates, we can't have in this group. So when we invite women to this group, is in collaboration with their individual psychologists. So we have to have a discussion with the psychologist and the physiotherapist that the women have in individual treatment to know and understand them better and how to approach them in their bodies and in their thoughts.
Yeah. Great. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you, Carmen, for the question as well.
Yeah.
The next question I have from Berenjen, Denise. If you want to go on mic as well and pose it yourself. Otherwise, I can read it. Happy to read it. She's asking how you've been. Sorry, I think someone tried to unmute. Okay. Berenjen, she was asking about whether you've been able to identify the reasons of the drop in the attendance. And so from one group started with 5 and ended with 2, one group starting with 7 and ending with 2. If you could identify the reasons of dropout.
I would in general say that the dropouts from this intervention are quite similar to the general dropouts from treatment at the Red Cross, like at our treatment center. And it usually is due to bodily issues like body pain and also challenging life circumstances. Like they have a lot of responsibilities for children and for, taking part of maybe working, maybe studying. I know one of them decided to leave the intervention because it was too hard on her to be in a group to discuss these kind of experiences. She still said that she appreciated getting the opportunity, but this was not the right time for her. So I would say the same reasons in general as we see dropouts at the treatment center.
And I would like to add on about this woman. She was in the first group, and then she was also in our second group because she wanted to try to be in a group again. But then she dropped out for the same reason, that it was too hard for her to be in a group.
And also she was one of the women that had like heritage from the Middle East. And, last spring, what happened in like a lot of countries in the Middle East, it made it too difficult for her to be in a group setting discussing experiences like that.
Thank you, Linda and Patricia. And in these cases, they continue, I understand, with individual sessions, right?
Yes.
They have individual sessions alongside this intervention group. So they are here which means they can have quite a lot of appointments at the Red Cross Treatment Center because they have their psychologist once a week. Often they have a physiotherapeutic treatment once a week. And then maybe they go to we offer physiotherapeutic group training, like in the warm water training, we have yoga, and we have other kinds of groups. And maybe they participate in one of those groups as well. And maybe they go to their social counselor once a week too, and then they come to this group too. So sometimes they have like appointments every day at the Red Cross.
Yeah.
It can be a full-time job to come to the Red Cross Treatment Center.
Right. Thank you, Linda and Patricia. I'm going to move now to the second question. It's from Ayok, Jacqueline Obot. I don't know, Ajok, if you want to unmute yourself and ask the question yourself. So unmute and ask the question yourself. Otherwise, I'm also happy to read it. Not sure if she's still here. I'll just read the question, and in the meantime, feel free to unmute. She's asking whether in the group interventions, whether you facilitate sessions where women talk about their trauma experiences, and how do you manage the emotional reactions that present, specifically dissociation. So I guess it's the end of the question. So how you manage these emotional reactions?
I think just to build a bit on what Patricia recently said when it comes to specifically dissociation, before entering the group intervention, we've had a discussion with the psychologist and the physiotherapist. So if a woman shows, high tendencies for dissociation, then it's not the right time to enter the group intervention. Of course, you can't always foresee dissociative episodes, but if they already notice the pattern of dissociation, we don't include them in the group. I think so far in the group, the women have discussed own real life experiences, and they can cry and they can become upset, but it hasn't been a problem so far. Patricia and I try to, not let them go too far into their trauma telling. Then it's better to take that with the individual psychologist. And also the group has been very, very kind to support each other. So of course that was a challenge that we expected, and we've discussed a lot, what do we do? And that's also why we are always both present in the group, so one can handle the situation that that is. But so far it hasn't been a problem at all. Would you like to add something, Patricia, on that?
No, I think you said it all.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thanks, Lisa. And Patricia, then the next comment I can see from Cajo. I don't know if Cajo, you want to go unmute and share the experience of group intervention for Afghan women refugees in Malaysia.
Wow.
Yeah.
And the clinical interventions you're mentioning to address the challenges. Go ahead, Cajo.
And also thanks Linda and Patricia. This is awesome because it just reminds me of things that we can also do and we are doing in Malaysia. So I just want to highlight that there are so many barriers that you have highlighted, which is the exact experience that we are also having here, where they have logistical barriers, they have challenges. Sometimes they have to take care of their children and they couldn't come. Sometimes just because of some somatic complaints, then which we all know that you'll benefit sometimes if you come here, but at the same time, somatic symptoms is also one of the presenting complaints that pulls you away. I think if there's only one thing that I can contribute to the discussion, it would be similar to what you have just shared. We don't process trauma in a group intervention. At least this is our experience or our insight, that they prefer to discuss their traumatic event or their torture experience individually. Even if they share, usually it don't get too deep. So usually we keep the group interventions for group focus for activities, and we use group interventions mainly to rebuild social connections. And we use that to rebuild some of the skills that they used to do. For example, they draw, they write poems. So these are the things that they have been doing, and these are found useful in increasing their coping strategies, but it does not show a lot of improvement in their pathological functionings. For example, their symptoms continue to be severe in terms of BI and BDI scores, but they reported better acceptance to these symptoms. So yeah, thank you for the presentation.
Thank you so much for your reflections. Yeah. I think what we try to do is to leave up to the women to decide on how much they want to share, because we want them to share life experiences. At the same time, of course, not go into a detailed trauma history if they can't handle it. And we've been discussing that we can also see in the first 2 rounds, we could see a difference between the groups, where the first group, or we could see a difference in if women had already partaken in individual treatment, they could talk about their traumas in a way that was more distant, like they could decide on what to talk about and not, whereas patients that hadn't like already partaken in individual treatment, they were more, once they started talking, they talked a lot. It was like they couldn't really decide on how much details to share. And then, of course, Patricia's and my responsibility was more to, let them share, but not share too much. So I guess it's a matter of finding the balance.
Exactly.
Okay, that's interesting. And I'm not sure whether that would be a difference between refugees in country of transit and also country of resettlement, because generally on our end, even if they talk about their trauma in individual sessions, in group sessions, they don't usually share. I mean, this is the observations that we see across different practitioners. So I don't think it's the problem of the practitioners. So yeah, just to highlight this part. Thank you.
It's a very interesting observation. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Kaho. And when you mean different clinical interventions to address it, that's what you're referring to, right? Group versus individual setting format. Yeah.
Yes. So we do individual, we do group, and in individual sessions we use CBT, and in CBT we look into what are some of the effective components, because we also find that not all CBT components were actually helpful for the refugees. So we can pick and choose depending on what the patients need.
Perfect. Thank you, Kaho and Linda and Patricia. We have a hand up from Margarita. Well, now it's gone, but otherwise I can ask Zamaret.
I'm sorry, I just took it down. No
worries.
No, I just wanted to hear from you. I find it interesting what you say. You stop people from sharing too much, and how do you do that? Because we found that sometimes when somebody starts talking, it's like you can't push the words back into their mouth if they want to get it out. And I'm interested to hear your strategies of preventing people from sharing too much.
I think sometimes what helps us is that we have an interpreter, and we've made a group rule that you always have to let the interpreter do its work so that we can understand. So we might have a signal like putting a hand up or some other signal just to have the space, and that allows us also to break in with a question or with a comment or something. So I think that sometimes that is very helpful, and that the interpreter makes that space for us to intervene when someone is just talking.
And I think also what's helpful is we spend the first session going into the purpose of the intervention, and also how what's the purpose and how we do it, presenting, the cases, and say that we're going to discuss the cases. Of course, you can share your own experiences, but you also have your individual psychologist. So we try to frame it so that they get a sense of what's the purpose. And of course, then we use the method that Patricia just described if we see it happening.
But we also want the women to share some experiences. We don't want them to hold back either.
Exactly.
And balance.
It's usually the first and second time that is most challenging, because then we know the women. Does this woman have a tendency to do that? Then we can approach the topic in a more sensitive manner. We can try to, I'd say that our role as facilitators, it's our responsibility to make it not too difficult to participate.
Thanks, Linda, Patricia, Margaret. I'm gonna invite Zamaret if she wants to unmute and share her question.
Thank you very much for a very interesting presentation. It's kind of a question, maybe more observation. I don't know how to say it exactly. Did you talk into consideration the factor of time, if we can call it like this? I mean, were the women already sometime in Sweden, or they just arrived, or because I'm thinking that the time when the point of time that we meet these women, let's say like this, it's very much influence their ability to participate in the group, and also to share the trauma and so on, and also to be more available to deal with whatever trauma caused them and so on. Because if if I meet women who just arrived to the country, they are so much busy in everyday chores, like to get around, to understand what's going on. So they're not very available, if we can call it like this, to deal with their own trauma. And then it's the way they are participant, but also the way that they are really actually dealing with the trauma.
Yes.
Exactly. To access a treatment at the Red Cross Treatment Center in Malmö, you have to come with a referral from another healthcare center, usually. We receive people regardless of their legal status. So we have asylum seekers, we have people with permanent residence, and with the citizenship. And we also have undocumented migrants. So that are our inclusion. We include anyone that wants to have treatment at our center, as long as they have a PTSD and they are willing to receive treatment. So for this group, we don't have any. We receive women from with different legal status. So it has been a group with different. They have been different long in Sweden. Some have been here like for 20 years, and some have just recently come to Sweden. And of course, they're dealing with different psychosocial situations. And sometimes that is influenced by how long they have been in the country. But we include anyone into the group.
But like we mentioned a minute ago, we do consult the psychologist and physiotherapist before welcoming a woman into the group. And we ask about dissociation, but also if it's appropriate for the women to participate in the group intervention if she has a trouble focusing on her traumas or the trauma history and is very much involved, in her acute psychosocial situation. I don't think that we would like to participate in the group. It wouldn't be the right moment, so to speak. But we agree with your observation, because of course we see that at our treatment center that women who are asylum seekers or undocumented migrants, sometimes they have a really hard time focusing on, trauma treatment, because everything else is much more acute.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks. And we have a question from Marianne Joyce. And Marianne, I'm not sure if you're able to pose your question on mic. Yes.
Yeah, I can do that. Thank you so much for this very thoughtful presentation. This is maybe the least important question. It's about logistics. Just, like, how do you decide when this is going to happen? What day? I mean, should it be during work hours? Or if the women are mostly available on Saturday mornings, do you make that accommodation? Like, how do you choose?
Oh, we've had this discussion a lot.
We still have it.
No, it's still trial and error.
Yeah.
I think we have it. Every session is 2 hours. So we tried from 1 to 3 p.m. and also from 9 to 11 a.m., I guess. And we tried to adjust the schedule to what fits the women. But of course, it's difficult. We also discussed offering the group after work hours, like in the evening. But then we said if a barrier to participating is family responsibilities, it's probably going to be even more complicated for women to participate, after school hours. We've discussed to try to have the group for like an entire week during the summer instead. So we're still, playing around with different ways to make it work. So it's not it's a very important question, I would say.
Yeah. But
Thank you for the validation.
But now it's more according to our working hours too. We have it during our working hours.
Yeah.
And we accommodate the group in that.
Yeah. So this semester it's 9 to 11 every Thursday morning.
Or at least this group now. Next group, we don't know yet.
Exactly.
Thank you.
Thank you, Marianne.
Good. And now I'm gonna ask Agnes. She's asking an interesting question in the chat, whether the livelihood component is at some point, at any point throughout these 3 phases considered? Any sort of livelihood support?
I'm not sure I understand the question.
Yeah, I think well, feel free, Agnes, to go on mic. But the way I understand the question is whether throughout any of these 3 phases of the project, you've considered adding any kind of socioeconomic support for these women.
Very good question. I don't think we have, and that's due to like our limitations. That's partly why we offer the session with the social workers, so they get the opportunity to ask questions regarding their psychosocial situation, also involving like job opportunities, but we don't have the resources to, help them with their livelihood or livelihood opportunities.
But at the centers, as we said before, we had like psychologists, physiotherapists, we have social counselors. So all the patients that come to the treatment at the center are offered to see a social counselor to do like their if they have any questions that need to be referred to regarding their psychosocial situation. And the psychosocial session that we have in this intervention is more for general questions. Like in the first group, they had questions regarding where to seek help if you're submitted to a partner violence. In the second group, they had more questions surrounding the children, what happens to children, and the social services. So the questions in this intervention for the psychosocial session is more like general questions and not so much my individual questions. Then they have to see their individual social counselor.
Yeah.
But what we have seen both doing the, the article overviews and also when interviewing women and healthcare staff at the Red Cross treatment centers, we saw that like the psychosocial situation and the financial situation could be a barrier to treatment. So I think it's important to note that all the treatment at our center is free, and also we can reimburse them for like bus tickets when they want to come to this intervention to make it easier for them to participate in the MHS group intervention. Yeah.
Thank you. Thanks for sharing. Yeah. Go ahead,
And
Patricia.
I see here in the chat that some are have some suggestions of like at Cows Road, we used to hire refugee women from the same community to act as a child caregiver in the same space. And we've had those thoughts too. What can we offer women so they can come to the group?
Yeah.
How can we help them come to the group? But
Because
we're still playing around, as Linda says, and trying to figure out how can we do this group so that we get so many women as possible to the group.
Yeah. And the biggest challenge is to help them come, like to overcome all the individual barriers, psychosocial and also structural barriers. And I think that's our biggest conundrum to this day, trying to solve like how can we also like think outside the box to reach these women. So we still have a lot of questions to answer. That's also why we love discussing this topic.
Yeah, makes sense.
Yeah.
That's, I mean, if anyone here would like to share any of their experiences with that on let's say easing or facilitating access for these women. We also have a comment from Metshild here in the chat. She's asking how many of the women in the group have a safe stay? How many are still in the asylum procedure?
I
If you
think,
know numbers.
yeah, I think in the two groups we've had so far, we only had two groups, right? Yeah. And there was one woman that was asylum seeker. But in Sweden, you don't get like a permanent residence anymore. You get just like a temporary residence that you have to renew. And for some, it's every year, and for some, they get like a temporary residence for 3 years. So even if you have like a residence now, it might be that it still affects you because you don't know if next year they're gonna let you stay or not. Yeah, so we have it's quite challenging for the refugees or people that has come as refugees to Sweden right now.
Yeah, if you don't have a Swedish citizenship,
Yeah.
You're not like here on a permanent resident.
No.
I don't know, Metzhild, if you want to add on that, or refer to any of your experience.
No, I just want to say that it's really sad, the situation of stay, and I think it always makes a difference. But yeah, I think it was really interesting to see how you proceed with the groups. I've been, we had groups in the beginning sometimes, like with more psychoeducation at the Berlin Center. And then after the individual treatment, also to get the people, more to be together, and then have them without our support later on. I think it's very, very interesting, this combination you showed of body work and talking, and I think this is really a great thing. And we have combined it also with arts work sometimes. So yeah, and especially with women, I think, yeah, it's a great, and thank you so much.
Thank you so much for your comment.
Yes.
And I think looking at the time, I'm just gonna bring the last question / comment from Robert, unless Robert wants to share on mic.
Yeah, I can.
That would be great.
Sure.
Hello, Robert.
Hello. Yeah, I'm just really interested. The physical movement component is really cool to me. And one of the things that I'm thinking about making it more accessible to maybe our clients with limited physical mobility or our elderly clients is, is it important? Is the collective nature of them doing it together more important, or do you feel like it's something we could maybe do as homework or as like an outside, like connecting them with an outside practitioner to do in private? Yeah, things of that, like a way that we could make it to where it's something that they could do it, or could they all do it together doing different movements that are more appropriate for their bodies?
Yeah, we actually have most of them have an individual physiotherapeutic treatment at the treatment center. So they also go to their own physiotherapy where they can work more individually. I think in this intervention we're in the group, I do offer them different alternatives so they can choose like different positions. If they don't want to do these special movements in standing, they can do it in sitting, or they can do it lying down. So I always give them alternatives. Then, as most of us, when we are in a group, we want to do like the other ones in the group. It's not always we listen to our own needs. So that is something I really try to encourage. But sometimes there is also a strength in doing something together when everyone does it together. For example, when we do some exercises to encourage like boundary settings, we use a lot of our voice, and we say no together, and we say stop together. And when we do that all together in the group, that is very powerful. So I think it depends. I try to accommodate the body awareness training after what has been discussed in the group discussions. So it depends. Sometimes they're more like it's more about self-care, and then I want them to do their own or listen to their own bodies and adapt the exercises after their intentions or their needs. And sometimes I want to collect them and do something powerful together, like move together or work in partner exercises, giving each other massage and exploring how is that to be touched by another person, by another woman. How is it to touch another person, and to have them reflect on that. I don't know if that answers your question. Thank you.
Thank you so much. It was a very, very relevant question to address, and I think it's getting really interesting. I would obviously like to continue because it's a very interesting discussion, especially this combining these two elements of more like body work and psychological counseling. So that's we're very grateful that you could share this experience with us today. I can see that Andrea has kindly already launched the poll with 3 simple questions about the experience today, sharing the space here. We would like to really thank Linda and Patricia for their time to share this experience with us today. For all of you, over 100 participants that have been prioritizing their time today to discuss this with us. And I just think this, from a personal perspective, these spaces get every time more and more hyggelig, as they say in Danish, which means cozy. And I hope you continue to join us in these spaces. As you can see on the screen, you have Linda and Patricia's emails if you want to reach out to them. Otherwise, we'll make sure we share both the presentation, recording, and other materials with all of you.
Perfect. Thank you so much for inviting us today. Thank you for participating, asking questions, and a huge thanks to the interpreters.
Yes,
Exactly.
thank you a lot.
Thank you so much for
Exactly.
today.
Big thanks.
Excuse me.
Big
Bye.
thanks to the interpreters as well.
Can I just say something very quickly? Sorry.
Yeah.
I'm looking at the thank you slide in the end with all kinds of languages. And I think you try to say thank you in Hebrew, but it's not what it says.
Oh,
What does
okay.
it say?
So,
Thank you.
okay.
Okay, so just so you know.
Okay, very good
I
comment.
hope we don't say anything inappropriate.
No, it's
No. Okay.
Okay.
it's okay, but it's not thank you. Okay.
Okay, thank you so
Thank
much for
you.
telling us.
Yes.
Okay. Enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you,
Bye-bye.
everyone. Thanks for
So
joining.
much. Bye.
Good to see you online.
Bye.
Bye. Bye, Julieta. Bye, Cajo.